Borobudur True Back History Book. Part 1. Santo Saba Works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, it is not defaming ethnic races and religions, but in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and Research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +6 2813 2132 9787. This book is an author's subjective study discourse to be used as material for discussion and thought, compiled from various sources. The technological advances that have been achieved by a civilization should bring about the advancement of mankind that was in its time, as well as technological advances that should also be able to re-examine all historical records that have been done in the past, which is possible to record history at the time. Previously experienced imperfection. The need for this book to be made is as a trigger for all of us so that the Indonesian people conduct a review and seek answers to all of its historical records. Due to the absence of historical records that explain the civilizations that occurred in the archipelago in the century BC or prehistoric times, many fossils and the oldest sites on Earth were found in the archipelago. Also referring to the work of writing by Arios Santos the Nunos, Brazil in 2005 in his book, Atlantis, The Lost Continent Finally Found, stating that Atlantis is an archipelago justified by Doni Irwanto the 24th of May 2015, and Dr. Danny Hillman Nadawijaja and the Purba Catastrophe team in dissecting Plato's work, Timaeus, Critias, in his book, Plato Does Not Lie. This is the basis of the writing of this book, with the hope that institutions that are competent for recording the history of the Indonesian nation will carry out research and re-investigation of the history that has been written specifically about Borobudur. In this book, the author is not and intends to corner, or is not defaming the beliefs and teachings of a religion. This book is a discourse to scientists. The author hopes that there will be clarification efforts that will be carried out by the competent institution to carry out research studies and re-record the history of the Indonesian nation in a complete and close to perfection. I hope this book will become one of its considerations. Borobudur. Historical notes during this. Borobudur is located in the heart of the island of Java, precisely in central Java province. This building is located on a hill, in the village of Borobudur, Mungkid, Magalang Regency, about 42 kilometers northwest of Yogyakarta city and about 100 kilometers southwest of Semarang city, surrounded by mountains that stretched around it. In the east there are Merbabu and Merapi mountains, in the west there are Suming and Sindoro mountains, and in the northwest lies Manore Hill, in the north, in the Magalang area, surrounded by Mount Telemoyo and Ungaran. When the Borobudur temple was built, until now it is not certain when this temple was built and who built it, so that the age of the Borobudur temple until now cannot be known for sure. In written historical records that exist so far about when and who built Borobudur, such as things that have been deemed correct and standardized by the general public, including the following. The architect who created Borobudur, named Gunadarma. The founder of Borobudur was Wangsa Silendra, which embraced Mahayana Buddhism, in the 8th century AD. Look back to the history of Borobudur. Really, the architect who created Borobudur, named Gunadarma. Gunadarma architects. Little is known about this mysterious architect named Gunadarma, whose name is based more on Javanese fairy tales and legends than historical inscriptions. The Gunadarma legend is related to the folklore of the Manore Hills, which resemble a lying body. This local fairy tale tells that Gunadarma's lying body turned into the Manore Hills. Of course, this legend is just fiction and fairy tales. In the records circulating so far, it is written Borobudur in Arsiteki by Gunadarma. Who is Gunadarma? Is it true that Gunadarma designed Borobudur? Borobudur, not architected or designed by Gunadarma. The name Gunadarma does not exist in the lineage of the Silendra house as well as the names in the archipelago kingdom. The name Gunadarma is in the mythos story in the Javanese ethnic area, which is the name that the Javanese people gave to the hills of the Javanese Kedu area middle, which forms like a human sleeping position on his side. So the name Gunadarma is not the name of a human being, it is a nickname that the Javanese people give to the hills that make humans sleep on their side. Gunadarma is the name of Javanese mythos. It is impossible for a building to be built by a figure whose name only exists in the mythos story. In conclusion, Gunadarma did not design Borobudur, Something that is less than perfect if a real physical object is annotated by making a statement built by a human figure whose origin and existence is unknown, and only a mythos. Really, Borobudur is called a temple. Indonesia Dictionary. The word, temple, is an ancient building made of stone as a place of worship, storing the ashes of kings' bodies. The word, temple, the building for worshipping gods. The word, vihara, a monastery inhabited by monks Buddhists. The word, pagoda, multi-story tower whose roof is on each level, usually built as a temple or memorial, for example in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, China, Japan and India. Conclusion from the clarification of sentences, Borobudur Buddhist Temple. R. Referring to the explanation of the word based in the Big Indonesian Dictionary, it can be concluded that the word temple is an ancient building made of stone as a place of worship, storage of the ashes of kings. In the explanation of temples, pagodas, in Borobudur is not found. Areas or places that are usually used for worship or worship of gods. It can be concluded that Borobudur is not a place for worship such as temples, mosques, churches or temples. So we can conclude that Borobudur is not a temple, because there are no areas or places to worship such as Buddhist or Hindu places of worship such as pagodas, temples and temples. With this understanding, the statement that Borobudur is a temple is dropped. Not true. Borobudur is designed based on Indian books. When the book was made and brought to the archipelago, Soelaman didn't build it either. The architect who designed it was not Gunadarma. This is a Javanese folk tale of the Manore Mountains, and J.G.De Kasparis in his 1950 dissertation estimated its construction was around 824 AD. So the year of construction was only the forecast of Kasparis. Let's take a look. Vwana Kaka Fala is now published under the name Borobudur. The books which he said underlie his design are Shilpa Shastra and Vastu Shastras from India. Is it true? Michael Meister, Stella Kramrisk, Kapila Vatsyayan, Indology, professors and scientists specializing in Indian architecture argue that the meaning of Shilpa is very complex, as the book, art, skill, craft, ingenuity, literally means arts and crafts. So this book is a guide to sculpting and iconography, which explains the principles of composition principles in the proportions of a sculpture. Vastu Shastra and Vastu Vidya are often associated with the Indus Valley Civilization, Mohenjo-daro. However, scholars such as Kapila Vatsyayan deny this because ancient texts on this book have never been found in the Indus Valley Civilization in India. Atharvaveda contains verses with mystical cosmogony, which provide a paradigm of cosmic planning. In this book, it does not represent architecture or practices related to engineering. Vastu Shastras is related to the architecture of buildings, houses, fortresses, temples, village and city layouts. Varahamihiras. Brihat Samhita dated 6th century AD, Meister, is the first known Indian text describing urban planning. A guidebook for planning cities and buildings, and it didn't exist until the 6th century AD. Manasara Shilpa, the book from South India, which is thought to have circulated in the 5th-7th century AD, is a guidebook on the design and construction of South India called Vastu. Isanasivagurudeva Padati is another Sanskrit text from the 9th century AD that describes the art of this building in South and Central India. Silpa Prakasa Odisha, written by Ramachandra Bhattaraka Kalakara around the 9th century AD or 10th century AD, is another development of Vastu Shastra. All of these books only existed in the 5th century AD, and Borobudur existed long before the books were made there. The former archipelago was the place for learning other nations. They see and take notes and copy and bring home the knowledge of the archipelago, and this real fact speaks. Pay attention to. From the travel book of the Chinese pilgrim Fa Hien 399 to 414 AD, from the Chinese text by James Legge, which is translated and annotated by Korean recension in chapter 40. On a 2-year boat trip from and to China, he got a disaster on his sea voyage, anchoring at Javadvipa from there back to China, arriving at Shantung, then to Nanking. After walking in this way for more than 90 days, he came to a region called Javadvipa, where Brahmanism was developing, while the other views in it were not worth talking about. Fa Hien lived in Javadvipa for 2 years and managed to get a copy of the Vinaya Pitaka of the Mahisasaka Durgagama and the Samyuktagama Sutra as well as the Samyukta Sanchaya Pitaka. All of these books were unknown in the land of Han. Having acquired these Sanskrit works, he returned to the ship of a large merchant, in which there were more than 200 people and with a smaller ship on board, to protect himself from the dangers of marine navigation. Wei Ning traveled for 3 years on the island of Java, 664 AD 667 AD, translating a sutra about the great understanding of nirvana. This translation was assisted by a Javanese expert named Jnanabhadra, namely the science of life after death, in the archipelago. This is named Svarga. The literary text of the word Svarga is in the bas-relief of the building and is not written as Nirvana Nibbana. What was seen and recorded by Fa Huan 337-422 ad in Javadvipa. On the hill a great tower was erected 15 yojanas apart, 470 feet high, decorated with gold and silver, perfected with every precious substance. On the side of the tower is erected a Sangharama called Abhayagiri, containing 5,000 priests. They also built a hall covered with gold and silver carvings, united with all the precious substances beside the hall in the Pei-tu tree planting. When it was about 220 feet high, the tree began to lean towards the southeast. The king ordered to make 9 tree supports, but the roots of the tree continued to penetrate the support and the roots came out up to 20. Through the earth, under the tree a chapel was built, in the center of which was a sitting figure. In the center of this hall there is a statue, about 22 feet tall. The entire body is glisteningly covered with 7 precious substances, in his right hand holding a pearl of priceless value. What Fa Huan Pafa was seeing at this time named Mendit. Furthermore, within the royal capital there was a chapel of extraordinary construction, in which the 7 precious substances were used. The king purified himself according to the strict Brahmanic rules. The people of the city also respected this building, performed rituals along standing belief. What Fa Huan called chapel is now called Borobudur. In 399 to 414 AD, Fa Hien on a journey in Svarnadvipa noted following the river Po Nai is the river Panai is Kampar. In the place where the students had lived and made the move. Walk around the tope stupa, as well as 4 teachers sitting in 4 corners, in which the tower has been erected. What Fa Huan calls topan tower is now called Muaratakas, and walk turning around is Prasawiya Pradaksina Tawaf. In the years 602-664 ad, Hyen Sang noted what he saw in Svarnadvipa. Next to him was a stupa built by the king, about 200 feet high. Near this there is a sign where the Tathagata is walking around. What Hyen Sang means, walking to and fro, by Hyen Sang is Prasawiya Pradaksina Tawaf. Sung Yun B. 518 AD. A native of Tunwang, Little Tibet, in a suburb of Loyang, Honan Phu town called Wanai, in 518 AD by the queen of the northern Wei dynasty. She was sent to migrate to study with Hui Sang from the Sheng Li Lo temple. Who arrived in the Yuchong Na Udayana region, produced a lot of gold, saffron and perfumed wood. On the side of the great Sangharama, in the Ta Li Lo valley there is a figure of Bodhisattva, carved from gold-colored wood. Song Yun met with Dhamma or Bodhidharma. The people look smart, religious, and understand the science of celestial bodies as well as navigation. We copy them up to 170 volumes and bring them home. The word Dhammo is recorded in the tribe in Svarnadvipa, the Domo tribe. The vessel called by the Chinese pilgrims was the place for the king of givers, or Pai Lo. The terms Haiyuan Siong, Fa Hien and Sung Yun, depicted in the Amravati and Sanchi reliefs, the most popular story among us Mongols. The history of the Chinese pilgrims' version of Vesantara is Nusantara, gold is Svarna. Golden Island is Svarnadvipa. In this archipelago they learned. Vwana Kaka Fala is now published under the name Borobudur. The books on which the design is based are not from India. The great nation is marked from its remains, and all publications about who our ancestors have been successfully eliminated. So that, we, today are so sure that, true, is all from the outside and we are just the importers nation. This is what happened. We have to return it. Is it true? The founder of Borobudur is the Silendra house who adheres to Mahayana Buddhism. Does the number of years written on the inscription show the number of the year it was founded? Before we discuss in detail about the question above, let us know, the year listed on all written inscriptions is the version that has been in circulation so far and must be revised, because the calculation of the beginning of the year began in 78 AD, this is the history of the ancestors of the Indonesian nation to disappear before that year. Wangsa Silendra or Silendra is the name of the Wangsa or dynasty of the kings who ruled Sriwijaya. The origin of this dynasty is still being debated by historians who mention it from Sumatra, Java, Cambodia, Funan and India. For an explanation of this we will find it in the next section. In exposing an explanation of historical facts, it can be proven based on existing inscriptions, as long as the inscription does not undergo physical changes and distortions of the meaning of what is written in the inscription. To prove whether it was true that the Silendra Wangsa founded or built Borobudur, let's follow this exposure. The name Silendra is written in many inscriptions with a variety of affixes at the beginning and at the end of Silendra words. 1. Silendravamsa was first encountered in the Khalasan inscription from 778 AD. 2. Silendragurubis, Silendrawansadalaxia, Silendrarajagurub is Caloric's phrase from the year 782 m. 3. Silendrawansadalakana, in the Abhayagiri Vihara inscription from AD 792. 4. Dharmadingadewa Silendra, in the Sojomurto inscription from 700 AD. 5. Silendranama, in the Kayumbungan inscription from the year 824 AD. 6. Outside the archipelago the name Silendra is found in the Ligar and Nalanda inscriptions 775 AD. In the above description about the name, Silendravamsa was first encountered in the Khalasan inscription from the year 778 AD. Let us look at the Khalasan inscription below. Reason No. D.147 at the National Museum, Jakarta. Sleman, Yogyakarta. Bur number 778 AD. Written in Pra-Nagari, North Indian, and Sanskrit. Namo Bhagavatyai Aryatarayai. 1. Yatarayatyamidadukabhavadbi magnum locum vilokya vidivatrivadhare zamani, sa. Upva Surendranaralokavi. Buddhasaram Tara Disatvabimatam Jaganirera. 2. Avarjya B. Maharajam Daya Pankapanam Panamkaranam Silendra Rajagurubas Tarabhavanam Haikaritam Srimat. 3. Gurvajnaya Kratajnyas C. Taradevi Kurtapi Tad Bhavanam Vinayamahayanavidam Bhavanam Kapyaryan Hexanam. 4. Pankuritavanadirapanamadira Desasastribarajnya Tarabhavanam Karitam Craving Fire Kapi Aryan Hexanam. 5. Rajye Pravardamane D. Rajnya Silendravamsatalakasya. Silendra Rajagurubas Tarabhavanam Kurtam Kurtabi. 6. Sakanarpakaladatar Varsasata Saptabir Maharaja Root Gurapujartham E. Tarabhavanam Panamkarana. 7. Grama Kalasanam Adata Samgaya Saksina Kurtva Pankaratavanadiripa Dasadyaksan Mahapurusan. 8. Buradaksinium F. Atula Data Samgaya Rajasimhana Silendrarajabupar Anaparapalyar Santatya. 9. The Pankuradibi the Tavanakadibi the Tirupadabi Padibiska Sadubi, CAAP. 10. Sarvan Evagamina Parthavendran Buyo Buyo Yakat Rajasimha, Samanyoyam Dharmasadar Naranam Kale Kale. Palanayo Bhavadbi. 11. Anena Punyena Viharayena Praditya Jata, G. Arthavibhagavijnya Bhavantu Sarv Tribhavopapana Janajananam. Anyusasanajnya. 12. Karyanapanaamkarana Sriman. H. Abhyakade Bhavinarpan, Buyo Buyo Vidivad Viharaparipalan Artham iti. Translate. Respect for Bhagavati Arya Tara. 1. Having seen the beings in the world who are drowning in tribulation, he crosses with the three true knowledge. It is Tara who is the only directional star in the world and place of the gods. Note. Sa. Correlation. Sa. Ya. Is translated by he, yang, he, that. 2. A sacred building for the beautiful Tara has been ordered by the teachers of King Silendra, after obtaining Maharaja Daya Pankapana Panamkarana approval. Note. B. Avarjya. The word avarjya, from the root vrj plus a, is in the absolutive form. 3. By order of the Guru, a sacred building dedicated to Tara has been established, as well as a building for the noble Guru skilled in teachings Tadhavanam Vinayamahayanabhidam Bhavanam, has been erected by the masters of the sacred structures. Note. See, Kritajñas. The word, Kritajne, has the same meaning as Karmajne, in the Denoyo inscription, which means experts, Sarkar, 1971-39, note number 37. 4. The sacred Tara buildings and likewise the buildings belonging to the noble monks, reshi, doers of ancestral teachings, have been erected by the king's officials, called Pankura, Tavana, Tirapa. Note. Monks, reshi, performers of ancestral teachings, strengthening the meaning of one word, in order to avoid interpreting only one teaching understanding. 5. A sacred Tara building had been established, by King Sailendra's teachers in the growing Sailendra jewel kingdom. D. Rajye Pravardhamain. The word, Pravardhamain, from the root ver which means to grow, is formed in the active participium with the locative case ending because it describes Rajye, which means, in a developing kingdom. 6. Maharaja Panankarana * builds a sacred Tara building in honor of the Guru, which has been running for 700 years. Note. E. Gurupujartham. The word, Gurupujartham means, to honor the teacher. To build, the author does not agree with this word because, the word build does not appear in this sentence, for the word approach with the intention of establishing, building in Sanskrit as, Jagra, wake up. 7. The village of Khalasan has been given to the Datta Samkhya after summoning the witnesses, people. Prominent village apparatus of Pankura, Tavana, Tirapa. 8. Unsurpassed alms, Bura, is given to Samkhya by a king like a lion. Rajasimha, by the kings of the Sailendra dynasty and subsequent rulers alternating. Note. F. Buradaxinium. Buradaxina word. The word, Bura, has several meanings, many, extensive, radiant. The Samkhya Gunas theory is popularly discussed, developed and refined by various schools of Indian philosophy, including Buddhism. Samkhya's philosophical treatises also influenced the development of various Hindu ethical theories. 9. By the Pankura and his followers, the Tavana and his followers, the Tirapa and his followers, by the soldiers, and the religious leaders, then later. 10. The king is like a lion. Rajasimha repeatedly asked the kings who would come so that the bound, Dharma would be protected by those who are forever. Note. Strapped, tied. 11. Well, by giving *viharayana, all the bhavantu of holy knowledge, the law of cause and effect, and birth in the three worlds, can be understood. Note. G. Pratityajata. The word Pratityajata, according to Lokesh Chandra, 1994-73, the meaning is equated with the meaning of Pratityasamutpada. Viharayana, place of ascetic worship, Vihara. Monastery, a place of meditation. Vihara. Vihasa, place of meditation. Wihanton. Monastery, place of worship. 12. Karyana Panankarana was asked repeatedly for noble kings to come. To always protect, Abhiya Kate. Holy building, Viharaparipalan. It's important according to the rules. Artham iti. Note. H. Abhiya Kate. Abhaya. Attitude of courage. Kate. Kata. Heart, feeling. H. Buswell. Robert Jr., ed. 2013. Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism. Princeton, N.J. Princeton. University Press. p. 2. ISBN 9780691157863. The Khalasan inscription is written in Pranagari letters and language. Sanskrit. Let's know about Sanskrit. Sanskrit non-standard spelling. Sanskrit is one of the oldest languages still known and has one of the longest history. The only language that can match the age of this language from the Indo-European family is only Hittite. Sanskrit word, in Sanskrit, Samskritabhasa. The meaning is perfect language. That is, the opposite of Prakrit, or folk language. Sanskrit is a classical Indian language, a liturgical language in Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism. Its position in South and Southeast Asian culture is similar to that of Latin and Greek in Europe. Sanskrit developed into many modern languages on the Indian subcontinent. This language appears in its pre-classical form as Vedic. What is contained in the Rigveda scriptures is the oldest and most archaic phase. This text is dated to about 1700 BC, and Vedic Sanskrit is the oldest known Indo-Aryan language and one of the oldest members of the Indo-European family of languages. Sanskrit. What will be discussed in this discussion is classical Sanskrit as reviewed in Panini's Sanskrit grammar, in around 500 BC Devimahatmaya script from Bihar or Nepal, 11th century. Sanskrit name, Sanskritam, with Devanagari, Javanese and Balinese script. Trait Samskrita means, cultured. The language referred to as Samskrita Vak, the language of culture, is by definition always a high language, used for religious and scientific purposes and contrary to the language spoken by the common people. This language is also called Deva Bhasa, which means, the language of the gods. The oldest surviving Sanskrit grammar is that of Panini and the title Astadhyayi, the 8 chapters of grammar, which dates more or less to the 5th century BC. This grammar is primarily a normative or prescriptive grammar which mainly regulates the standard and non-descriptive ways of using it, although this grammar also contains descriptive parts, especially regarding the Vedic forms that were no longer used in the Panini era. Most of the Dravidian languages of India, although part of a different language family, they have had a strong influence on Sanskrit, especially in the form of loanwords. Kannada, Telugu and Malayalam have the largest number of loanwords while Tamil has the lowest. The influence of Sanskrit on these languages is recognized by the discourses of Tat Sama, Sama, and Tat Bhava, rooted. Meanwhile, the Sanskrit language itself also had the influence of the Dravidian substratum from very early times. Vedic Sanskrit, or abbreviated as Vedic language, is the language used in the Vedic scriptures, the earliest holy texts from India. The earliest Vedic text, Rigveda, is thought to have been written in the 2nd millennium BC, and the use of Vedic language continued until about 500 BC, when the classical Sanskrit codified by Panini began to appear. The Vedic form of Sanskrit is a close derivative of Proto-Indo-Iranian. Research on Sanskrit by Europeans was started by Heinrich Roth, 1620–1668, and Johann Ernst Hengselden, 1681–1731, as well as the linguist Sir William Jones, that the name Sanskrit, or Sanskritam, is widely used in Java and Bali. The adjective Samskrita means cultured. The language referred to as Samskrita Vak means cultured language, is by definition a high language, used for purposes this religious and scientific necessity contradicts the language spoken by the common people. This language is also called Deva Bhasa, which means language of the gods. The word Sanskrit in Sanskrit is written Samskritabhasa, which means perfect language. That is, the opposite of Prakrit, or folk language. The language, Prakrit, or folk language, is written in Sanskrit with the text Prakrita, means natural. This is the name of a collection of languages in ancient India which are folk languages. The language, Prakrit, is opposite from the language, Sanskrit, or high language, which means in an ordinary book depicts a king or Brahmin speaking Sanskrit, but a farmer uses the language, Prakrit. It means that the Indian language which is commonly used is not Sanskrit. Sanskrit researcher Sir William Jones, speaking to the Asiatic Society of Bengal in Calcutta, February 2, 1786, says the bottom line is, Sanskrit, sources, is not there. This means the source, Sanskrit. It was not where he was lecturing at that time, India, but from elsewhere. Panini, the Pakistani, first wrote about the Sanskrit grammar entitled Astadhyayi, a Sanskrit grammar book which contains 3,959 grammar laws of Sanskrit written in the 5th century BC, not he who makes Sanskrit not mistaken. Devanagari script, from the Sanskrit, city of gods. This script emerged from the script, Brahmi, and came into use in the 11th century AD. Brahmi. This script is written from left to right. According to the hypothesis, this script based on the letter Aramaic is used. King Asoka 270 BC 232 BC. Alphabet language. Aramaic is used by the Aramaic people, who lived in the area around Mesopotamia, Syria, Around the 10th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire 331 BC, Ancient Aramaic 500 BC, changed to Imperial Aramaic, imperial language. Everything that is considered the oldest source of the alphabet language is 500 BC, while in the archipelago long before that year there was a place to study science, at the university center level, including the science of the language, Sanskrit. The language, Sanskrit, has long existed in the archipelago since thousands of years ago and was used by our ancestors. The literacy of the word, language, Bhasa, is Sanskrit meaning, speaking accent. This is native to our language. There are about 800 words of the language. Sanskrit is absorbed into Indonesian. The motto of the Indonesian National Army is, Jalasu Bumyamka Jayamahe. Jalsveva Jayamahe. Swa Buwana Paksa. Kartika Eka Paksi, Rastra Sewakadama. Is the motto of the words the language of India. Why is everything published from there? Is it true that Sanskrit is not the original language of the archipelago's ancestors? Let's see the clarification. The literacy of the word, Jalsveva, consists of two parts, namely, Jalasu, and the word, Eva. Jalasu comes from the root word, Jala, can be interpreted as masculine, and the word, Jalasu, is the plural form and locativus which literally can be translated as, in the waters, in the ocean or, ocean. The literacy text of the word, Eva, is a particle and can be translated as, law, and the text of the word, Jayamahe, comes from the verb, ji, which is conjugated according to the present word. The third persona is plural in indicative capital and can literally be translated as, we are victorious. So, this sentence literally means, it is in the waters that we are victorious, or, in the ocean we are Jaya. The word, Mahe, is the beginning of the word, Maha. This is not a word from India. The word, Mahe, means, great, or, great nation. The literacy of this word is recorded in the bas-reliefs of Borobudur in panel frame number 43, namely the word Mahachakya and the word, Kakya, are the Kaka Nusantara. Maheshakya is absorbed into Sanskrit. Panini is used in books such as Upanishads, Veda and Panini. It is not what makes Sanskrit. The Kakya, Sakya nation is the great Aryan, namely, the Saka. In the land of this archipelago, there are hundreds of inscriptions with the number of Saka years, and the calculation of the beginning of that year did not start in 78 AD. It was the beginning of the year when the conquest of King Salivahana in South India by the Saka, our ancestors. The Saka, our ancestors, were the archipelago strong warriors. The commander of the Marine Corps has the slogan, Jalasu Bumyamka Jayamahe, which means, in the sea and land we are Jaya. The Indonesian Air Force has a motto of the sentence, Swa Buwana Paksa. The word, Swa, comes from the word, Sva, which means, I alone. The word, Buwana, comes from the word, Bhavana. The meaning of the word this text means, world, or in this context is interpreted as, motherland. The literacy of the word, Paksa, is read as, Paxia, means, wings, or means, defender or protector. Tniad, Bersemboyan, Kartika Eka Paksi. Kartika, means star, Eka, means one, and the word, Paksi, means bird. Combined in one meaning is, matchless brave soldier who upholds high ideals, namely the nobility of the country, nation and true warrior. Pulri has the symbol and motto, Rastra Sewakadama, means, serving the community. The title is, First Brata, from, Tri Brata, in the sense of complete unity to, Pulri is the servant of the Nusa and the nation. All the words and glorious motto above are, Sanskrit. This is the language of the nation Kakya, Sakya, Saka, Aryan, the ancestors of the Indonesian archipelago, the previous advanced people who were brave enough to expand, understand that Sanskrit is not Indian. Dharmadasa 700 to 620 BC, Dharmapala 670 to 580 BC, Suvarnadvipa Dharmakirtis 610 BC 520 BC, Kumarila Bhatta I 618 to 540 BC, Adi Sankara 569 to 537 BC, Dharmapala is a student of Dharmadasa, teacher of Svarnadvipa Dharmakirti, who has a pupil Atinyana origin Tibetan development figures of the Vajrayana school there. The university center level learning place called Dharma Phala in Svarnadvipa was built long before the establishment of its branch, Nalanda, in Bihar, India in 427 AD, on the initiative of Rajapala, the lineage of Silendra. This is the location that Fa Hien saw and recorded in 399 to 414 AD. Xuanzang, Haiyan Sang 602, 664, add also It Xing 689 to 695 AD, who lived for 5 years. Also Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana lived and studied for 12 years here at Svarnadvipa at the original Dharmic Learning Center. Kakya, Sakya is the great Aryan, namely, the Saka. Our ancestors were a nation of gallant and formidable warriors, his motto. Jalasu Bhumyamka Jayamahe. His predecessor conquered King Salivahana of South India in 78 AD. This year is not to count the beginning of the Saka year in inscriptions, so that the advanced history of our ancestors is lost before that year. So, the language, Sanskrit, is the native language of the Indonesian archipelago. Originating from our ancestors learned and used, it spread to 3/4 of the earth along with the spread of Dharmic original teachings, which underlie the growth of 3 great teachings in the land of India: Hinduism, Buddhism and Jaina. This is an academic fact. Analysis of the writings listed on the Khalasan inscription against the Silendra house. 1. The use of Varanagari, Sanskrit in the Khalasan inscription. This text is dated to approximately 1700 BC. The use of the Vedic language was carried out until about 500 BC, when the classical Sanskrit codified by Panini began to appear. The Vedic form of Sanskrit is a close derivative of Proto-Indo-Iranian. The writing of the Tipitaka book was recorded in the 1st century AD. King Kaniska of Afghanistan held a great communion which was not attended by the Theravada group. Starting from this gathering, Mahayana Buddhism developed in India and then spread to Tibet and China. In this Pasamuan it was agreed that there will be Buddhist scriptures in Sanskrit with many additional new sutras that are not found in the Tipitaka Pali scriptures. Writing Sanskrit, with Devanagari script, is widely used in the writing of inscriptions and previous books in Java and Bali. If we compare the use of Sanskrit in writing Vedic Hindu teachings and writing Sanskrit in the Buddhist Tipitaka book, then we will know that the Vedas previously used Sanskrit. This proves that the use of Sanskrit in the writing on the Khalasan inscription most likely followed an older written language, such as that used in the Hindu Vedic book. On the basis of the predecessor, Silendra had a pre-existing religion. Missionaries came to the archipelago. In analyzing the use of language in writing in the Khalasan inscription, the writer concludes that the inscription writer is not Buddhist. In other words, the name, Silendravamsa, was first encountered in the Khalasan inscription from 778 AD. He was someone who was not Buddhist. 2. In the translation of the Khalasan inscription, the first stanza is written, Namo for Bhagavati Arya Tara. After seeing all the beings in the world immersed in misery, he crossed over. Carry, teach, preach, Vidivatrivadhare, the 3 right knowledge. He is Tara, who is the star only guiding for the direction in the world and realm of the gods. There is a key word that we can look at, namely, Bhagavati Arya Tara, 3 right knowledge. What is the meaning of the word? Where is it often mentioned and what teaching mentions that name? Bhagavati Arya Tara. The word Bhagavati is a combination of 2 words Bhagavad and Vati. Bhavat in general can mean book. Vati or Wati is identical to the mention of woman. This term usually describes the female goddess, for example. Bhagavata Purana. Devi Bhagavata Purana, Sanskrit. Devi Bhagavata Purana, also known as Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and Devi Bhagavatam, is a Sanskrit text that belongs to the Purana, a genre of Hindu literature. The text is considered the Mahapurana, main Purana, in parts of India, while others are included as one of the Upapurana, minor Purana. 7. In the Hindu religious tradition which upholds it. Devi or Shakti, goddess, as the primordial creator of the universe and Brahman, ultimate truth and reality. This shows the female god as the origin of all existence, creator, maintainer and destroyer of all things, as well as people who believe in it as a way to spiritual liberation. While all the main Hindu Puranas mention and respect as a goddess or female god. Devi Bhagavata Purana, Some scientists conclude when this book began to exist, among them Ramachandran, which states that this book existed in the century before the 6th century AD. Some others mention between the 9th to 14th century. Rajendra Hazra indicates the 11th or 12th centuries, while Lalai states that this text began to take shape in the late 1st millennium, expanded over time, and the first complete version existed in the 11th century. Tracy Pinchman says this text was between 1000 and 1200 CE. Bhattacharya, author of the book Panchkanya. The Ramayana mentions Tara as a woman, very loved and respected by Vali, her husband. In the orthodox Hindu philosophy, the word Tara, with Ahalya and Mandodari, in the Ramayana, also in the Mahabharata. Some researchers believe Paranasabari is another name for the goddess Tara in Hinduism. Tara in Buddhism is a bodhisattva woman. In Mahayana Buddhism, who appears as a Buddhist woman in Vajrayana Buddhism, she is known as the mother of liberation, and as the virtue of success in work and achievement. In Tibetan Buddhism, Tara is considered a female bodhisattva who represents compassion and deeds. Tara is the female aspect of Avalokitesvara, and in some stories, Tara is also known as the heavenly deity who hears the cries of beings experiencing suffering in samsara. Whether Tara originated as a Buddhist or Hindu goddess is unclear and remains a source of investigation among scholars. Malar Ghosh believes she originated as a form of the goddess Durga in the Hindu Purana. Tara in Buddhism and in Shaktism is one of the 10 Mahavidyas. It may be true that the philosophy of the goddess entered into Buddhism stems from Shaktism, i.e. local worship or folk religion. The previous word Dui was institutionalized more in Hinduism, which had been developed by the early medieval period, i.e. the Middle Kingdom of India. Perhaps the oldest text mentioning the goddess Tara in Buddhism is the Prajnaparamita Sutra, translated into Chinese from the original Sanskrit c. 2nd century AD. Around the time of that time, Mahayana Buddhism was dominant of thought in India and China. Thus, it will be seen that the feminine principle makes its first appearance in Buddhism as a personified goddess in the Prajnaparamita scriptures. Tara became very popular in the Buddhist Vajrayana school, as a deity with his writing on Tantra in the 8th century Pala, and, with the Indian Buddhist movement to Tibet via Padmasambhava, the worship of the goddess Tara was influential into Tibetan Buddhism. Goddess Tara is considered the mother of all Buddhas, which usually refers to Buddha's enlightened wisdom, while simultaneously echoing ancient concepts of the mother goddess in India. Regardless of whether she is classified as a deity, Buddhist, or bodhisattva, Tara remains immensely popular in Tibet, and Tibetan exile communities in North India, Mongolia, Nepal, Bhutan, and is worshipped in majority Buddhist societies around the world as the female deity of Avalokitesvara. In Chinese Buddhism, the philosophy of the meaning of Tara as a female god is in the teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism. In Hinduism, it seems that it refers to the Hindu goddess but has not yet been able to confirm that Bhagavati Tara is a goddess in Hinduism, marked with the goddess Tara in the Ramayana and Mahabharata books. Both books it is included in the Rigveda, which is a book that is considered earlier in Hinduism, which is strongly reflected in the teachings of Brahmanism. The conclusion of the author about Bhagavati Tara on the Khalasan inscription is that the word Bhagavati Tara is not always identical, indicating the name written on the inscription of Hindu, Buddhist or Brahmanism. The word Vidivatrivadhare has the root word Vidi. In local mention of the archipelago, it is usually called Widi. The word that is usually side by side with Widi in the original tradition of the archipelago is Hyang. Said Hyang is a word that does not come from other cultures outside the archipelago. Often said in the mention of the unity of the word, namely, Hyang Widhi, in the original teachings of the archipelago it can mean God. Hyang Kawi, Javanese, Sundanese, and Balinese in Indonesian mythology is a term referring to an invisible power or spiritual entity that has supernatural supreme power. This word can be interpreted as God or purified. This spiritual entity can be found in the original teaching philosophy of the archipelago, not from outside terms, including Sundanese Wiwitan, Kejawan, and Balinese Hinduism. In modern Indonesia, this term tends to be associated with Dewa, Dewata, or God. The realm where Hyang lived was called heaven, synonym for Svarga or paradise, especially on the island of Bali. He is the equivalent of the Brahman concept in original Dharmic philosophy preserved perfectly in Bali. He is also known as Sanghyang Widiwasa or Sanghyang Widai or his Asintya. We return to the sentence. Vidivatrivadhare 3 right knowledge, he is Tara who is the star only guiding for direction in the world and realm of the gods. The brief explanation above explains that the first sentence about Tara and Vidi is an explanation of the words that emphasize the teachings that Silendra embraces neither Buddhism nor Hindu India. What teachings are embraced? From the explanation of Vidi or Widi in local pronunciation as well as the word Hyang which is usually juxtaposed we can know that the word refers to the original teachings of the archipelago. In this case we refer to the original beliefs of the Balinese people. Let's try to re-examine the word. 3 true knowledge, is that. If our assumptions are not Hindu or Buddhist, we will refer to the teachings before Buddhism and Hinduism. The teachings are philosophies to belief that have been thought to underlie Buddhism and Hinduism or Brahmanism and even Jainism. Is that Brahmanism? Brahmanism is a pioneer of Hinduism and Buddhism. This religion developed in northern India among the Aryan people who came to India some 8,000 years ago. The main characteristic of this religion is the cycle between death and rebirth, reincarnation, and the division of humans into 4 different castes. This caste in Sanskrit is called a color. There is a similarity with the philosophy of Balinese teachings author. Knowledge of Brahmanism in its early stages comes from the scriptures that are still primitive and originally composed of oral literature and date between 1500 BC and 400 BC. First of all are the so-called Empat Veda or Katar Veda, Veda meaning is knowledge, which dates from 1500 to 800 BC. After that there are Brahman Texts, approximately 1000 BC 600 BC. These texts are a series of various descriptions contained in the texts, rites and customs found in the 4 Vedas and specially composed for the Brahmins or Panditas. Then there are the texts called the Upanishads, 800 BC 500 BC. This book discusses the pantheistic philosophy of the divine nature and the end of man. Then there are the Sutras, 600 BC 400 BC, which are guidelines for the implementation of rituals and customs. Among them are the Grihya Sutra, the manual for household rituals, and the Dharma Sutra. The note here explains it is not the Dharma Sutra or the Dhammapada of the Buddha. These 2 books reflect the practical and popular side of Brahmanism in which the Brahmanas and Upanishads show its philosophical and speculative side. Still close to these legal books there is a well-known book called Manawa Dharma Sastra, and in English it is often called the Laws of Manu or the Code of Manu. It is possible that this Manu book dates from the 5th century BC. These books together with the 2 sacred epic literature namely, Ramayana and Mahabharata, constitute the most important in the literary repertoire of Brahmanism. Author's note. For an explanation of Ramayana and Mahabharata, occurring in the archipelago by the author will be presented in a different book. Early belief in Brahmanism or belief in Vedic religion in the true Vedic era, can be said to be quite simple. This includes the worship of many deities, large and small, who are personifications of natural powers. The main ones are Varuna, the all-encompassing god of heaven, creator and owner of everything that exists and defender of moral law called Surya, or the sun god, Savitri the luminary, and Vishnu, who is said to divide the earth into 3 parts and provide fertile fields to mankind, god of space, Indra. Indra was armed with Vajra, which was lightning. Rudra, later in Indian Hinduism became known as Shiva, who was blessed, the god of hurricanes and a hindrance to those who were evil but friend of good people. Agni, god of fire. In the discussion of Brahmanism in the Khalasan inscription notes about the word, the 3 true knowledge, and not originating from Hindu India or Buddhism, here the author assumes a subjective assumption regarding its relation to the original teaching philosophy of the archipelago, in this case the Balinese belief as follows. In religious life in Bali, the god Brahma can never be released from his religious breath. The depiction of Lord Brahma is believed to be the main god, ruler and protector of the south, armed with a gada, with a goose in color, has Sakti Dui Saraswati, an all-red attribute. In worship in a traditional village environment, he is worshipped in a temple called Pura Desa or Pura Bail Aging, where in this temple there will be a building made of bricks as a tribute to him. Meanwhile in Bali region, the worship of Lord Brahma is at Pura Luhur Andakasa. Examples of the mention of Dewa Dewa in Balinese rituals that mention the word name of God is written above or contained in the mantra sentence in the ritual of worship. The mantra or prayer of praise addressed to Lord Brahma as the creator is called Brahma Stawa. 1. Worship you Lord Agni, worship you Lord of Day, worship you Lord Isa, who witnessed all kinds of sacrifices. 2. Lord Agni has three appearances: Brahma, Vishnu and Mahavira, cause for tranquility, nourishment and protection. 3. His favor is generated in the world, good luck, very pleasant to see, any action will be successful without a doubt. 4. Lord Brahma, the God of all beings, he is the most exalted, he who gives grace to the Guru, he who is born from the lotus flower, who has four faces, that is perfect Brahman. 5. Lord Agni suppresses all evil, who is born from the golden seed, the body of the universe, and is the highest bliss. The name of the god listed in the mantra sentence above proves that the name of the god already exists, and it is also known that Indian Hinduism is not recorded by the missionaries spreading Hinduism. So the names of deities above are pre-existing names from Hinduism in India. Author's note. For the spread of Hindu teachings discussed in different books. Conclusion on the sentence: the word Vidivatrividhare has the root word Vididiva ttri vidhare 3 right knowledge. He is Tara who is the star only guiding for the direction in the world and realm of the gods are. Tiga Vidi ttri vidhare or Tiga Vidai is identical to three gods, which depicts the three knowledge of gods as lighters of the way, namely Dewa Agni, Dewa Isa, Dewa Hari Vishnu. In Balinese tradition, Trimurti is the three powers of Brahman, Sanghyang Widi, the designation god in Balinese belief, in creating, maintaining, melting nature and its contents. Trimurti consists of three, namely, Lord Brahma, means, creator, Utpathi, Sakti. Dewi Saraswati who is the goddess of weapon science. Bo, symbol, A, color. Red, Lord Vishnu, function, preserver, Stiti, Sakti. Dewi Lakshmi or Shri, weapon. Disc, symbol. U, color. Black, Lord Shiva. Function. Destroyer Pralina, Sakti. Goddess Durga, Uma, and Parvati, weapon. Trident, symbol. M, color. Multicolor. When the symbols of the three gods are combined, it will become Aum which reads, Om, Om which is a sacred symbol. In the philosophy of Brahmanism the three right knowledge are implied as Lord Varuna, Dewi Savitri, Lord Vishnu, Surya, or the god of the sun. The sky god Indra was later known as Shiva and Dewa Agni or the god of fire, which later appeared in the philosophy of Indian Hinduism, as Brahma, Wisnu, Siva. 3. In the translation of the second stanza Khalasan inscription, it is also implied that the fifth stanza is written. A sacred building for Tara which is truly beautiful was ordered by the king's guru Silendra, after receiving the approval of Maharaja Dayapankapana Panamkarana. We pay close attention to the word, ordered by, and after obtaining approval from. In this sentence there is an affirmation of a decision by two hierarchies of office, ordered to and after obtaining approval. The subordinate hierarchy is the ruling teacher, the upper hierarchy is the Maharaja who has given approval. For what is the word affirmation of the command that has been agreed upon? This is an affirmation of the commands that must be followed to be carried out by the inscription reader at the time the inscription is written and to the inscription reader at a later date after the inscription is written. The affirmation of the hierarchical level that is made and stated is the affirmation of the commandments that must be carried out in the public at present and in the future, which explains that the treatment for this sacred building has also been carried out by its predecessors. We can understand from two subjects: the one who rules is Guru, and the one who approves is Maharaja. In order to emphasize the successor ruler to do the same, as did his previous ruler. Conclusion on sentences. A sacred building for Tara which is absolutely beautiful was ordered by the king of Sailendra's teacher, after obtaining the approval of Maharaja Dayapankapana Panamkarana. It is a sacred building designated for Bhagavati Tara as an existing building, and the treatment of respect has been carried out by the predecessor as well as by the one who ruled when the inscription was written, and must also be done by the successor by marked in the sentence affirming the order and approval from the ruler. So the name, Sailendravamsa, was first encountered in the Khalasan inscription from the year 778 AD, is someone who has done the work of honoring the existing sacred buildings and ordered future generations to do it. 4. In the translation of the 6th verse Khalasan inscription is written, Maharaja Panankarana built a sacred Tara building in honor of a guru who has been running for 700 years. We look at the word build. Whether the word build here is worthy of the clap. Note the next sentence, a sacred Tara building to honor the teacher who has been running for 700 years. To build, the author does not agree with this word because the word build does not appear in this sentence, for the word approach with the intention of establishing, building in Sanskrit as jagra, wake up. The word construct, if it is based in the full sentence translation description in stanza 6, will contradict a long description of more than one word, namely, a Tara shrine to honor the teacher that has been running for 700 years. A Tara sacred building to honor the teacher is the object sentence that is explained, which has been running for 700 years, is an adverbial sentence that describes the object. The verb builds, if it is interpreted as being or has just been built, will fail with the explanation of the verb that has been done and written by writing the adverb time, the length of time. It has been running for 700 years, so an explanation that is impossible if the work done at this time is annotated with the work that has been done in the past and is still being done today, let alone written in one complete sentence which is not separated. The conclusion of the sentence in the 6th stanza on the Khalasan inscription is, the sentence clearly states that the holy building designated for Bhagavati Tara that has existed, has been around for a long time since 700 years ago, with the addition of a clear explanation of the hundreds of tens and units, with the intention of affirming the treatment of the object that the perpetrator has been doing this work a long time ago and continues the traditions of its predecessors. So the name, Silendravamsa, was first encountered in the Khalasan inscription from the year 778 AD as someone who did not build a sacred building for Bhagavati Tara. But the sacred building has been around since 700 years ago. 5. In the translation of the Khalasan inscription stanzas 7 and 8, it is written, 7. The village of Khalasa has been given to the Datta Samkhya after summoning the witnesses, people. The leading village apparatus are Pankura, Tavana, Tirapa. 8. Unsurpassed alms. Bura, given to Samkhya by lion-like king. Rajasimha, by kings of the Silendra dynasty and subsequent rulers. The word with the thick sign of Khalasa village is a word that refers to the name of the village or place which is currently called Khalasan village. In this discussion the community is obliged to take care of sacred buildings. In the next discussion we will find out about this in Sima terms. Namely the community Pradekan land which is exempted from paying taxes and the community has the obligation to care for sacred buildings. Description of the word, Samkhya. Etymology. Samkhya, Samkhya, also referred to as Sankhya, Samkhya, or Sankhya, is a Sanskrit word which, depending on the context of the preceding and following sentences, means, to reckon, count, deliberate, reason by numerical count, relating to numbers, rational. Quote, in the context of ancient Indian philosophy, Samkhya refers to the understanding of philosophy in Hinduism based on systematic enumeration and rational examination. The word marked in bold Samkhya is the word inscribed on the inscription. Whereas in general writing and pronunciation for the present time is identical to the word Samkhya, based in the literature study that the author obtained about the word Samkhya, detected from the philosophy of ancient Brahmanism, namely the main element of theosophy in Vedas in the formation of the philosophical Brahmanism, namely the 6 main elements of the darshanas, 3 of which are Vedanta, Samkhya and Yoga. Brahmanism is sometimes considered synonymous with Hinduism. The early phase of Samkhya is known to be in the early Upanishadic period. Around 800 to 700 BC, when the ascetic and monastic spirituality, sramana and yati, of the theosophy in India, the Indian scientists Bhattacharya and Potter, concluded that combining Proto-Samkhya ideas with methodology systematic reasoning, epistemology, underlies the concept of spiritual knowledge, vidya, jnana, viveka, making Samkhya a more developed, comprehensive philosophy. These ideas developed and are found in texts such as the Chandogya Upanishad. Johnston in 1937, analyzing the origins of Samkhya against Hindu and Buddhist teachings, then wrote and concluded, the origins of Samkhya are in line with the individual analyses carried out by the Brahmins and the early Upanishads, initially with a view to ensuring the effectiveness of the sacrificial rites and then to find meaning, salvation in the religious sense and the method for achieve that. Found in the Kitab, the Kaushitaki Upanishad and the Chandogya Upanishad, the extracts found from the two main ideas of classical Samkhya. The meaning of Samkhya. Samkhya or Sankhya is one of the 6 astika of Hindu philosophy: Samkhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisesika, Vedanta, Purva Mimamsa. It is most closely related to yoga in Hindu philosophy, and it influences other subsets of Indian philosophy. Samkhya is an enumerationist philosophy whose epistemology accepts 3 of the 6 pramanas, proofs, as the only reliable means of gaining knowledge. These include pratyaksa, perception, anumana, inference, and the word aptavakana, word testimony of reliable sources. Sometimes described as one of the rationalists in Indian philosophy, this ancient philosophy gives either exclusive or compelling reasons. Samkhya is a very dualist. Samkhya philosophy regards the universe as consisting of 2 realities, Purusa, consciousness, and Prakrti, matter. The jiva, living being, is to which the Purusa attaches to Prakrti in some form. This fusion, the Samkhya theosophical view, led to the emergence of buddhi, intellect, and ahankara, ego consciousness. The universe is described as one created by Purusa Prakrti entities infused with various permutations and combinations of various mentioned elements, senses, feelings, activities and thoughts. During a state of imbalance, one of the more constituents influences the other, creating forms of servitude, especially of the mind. The end of this imbalance, servitude, is called liberation, or kaivalya, in Samkhya's view. The existence of God or the Supreme Being was not immediately affirmed, not considered relevant by the Samkhya philosopher. Samkhya argues with the final cause of Ishvara, God. While Samkhya's view considers the Vedas to be a reliable source of knowledge, it is an atheist philosophy according to Paul Deussen and other scholars. The main difference between Samkhya and Yoga is that Yoga accepts a personal, but fundamentally inactive, God, or personal God. Gunas in his theory about Samkhya is quality, innate tendency. 55 Guna states, there are 3 kinds. Best sattva, loving, enlightening, positive, and constructive. Raja is one of activity, chaotic, passionate, impulsive, potentially good or bad. And tamas being the qualities of darkness, ignorance, corruption, lethargy, negative. All of them, all forms of life and human beings, some scholars agree on the meaning of these 3 types in Samkhya, but in different proportions. These interactions from gunas define the character of a person or thing, nature, and determine the progress of life. Samkhya in gunas theory is popularly discussed, developed and refined by various Indian philosophical schools, including Buddhism. Samkhya's philosophical treatises also influenced the development of various Hindu ethical theories. The conclusions of the author about Samkhya that are linked to the current Samkhya philosophy are: the word Sangaya written on the inscription is the main meaning of the teaching, which is currently called Samkhya, namely the procession of truth-seeking rituals in the original teachings of the archipelago, not Hindu or Buddhist teachings, but become the source of the previous teachings, namely Brahmanic Pulsafa. The visualization form of the procession appears in the statue at Borobudur. Note: for a discussion about this in the book Borobudur Saba Salomo compiled by the author. Definition of data in the Sanskrit dictionary. Data. On, continuously, datapati. Sun, datapitana. Silence, silence. Datapatera. Silence, silence. Datatita. Silence, silence. Datataitaya. Silence, silence. Daddy. Better, better. Daditan. Silence, silence. The meaning of data Samkhya can refer to a personal person or individual who carries out a ritual procession silently meditating in silence or contemplation, leading to the theosophical philosophy as intended in the above description of Ethansati, the universe, and its creatures. Bura, Daksinium Atula, Data Samkhya, Rajasimhana Salendrarajabupare Anaparapalyar Santatya. The incomparable meaning of almsgiving, Bura, was given to the Samkhya, referring to Johnston's 1937 work, analyzing the origins of Samkhya against Hindu and Buddhist teachings, then writing and concluding, the origins of Samkhya are in line with the individual analysis of the Brahmins and the early Upanishads. Initially with a view to ensuring the effectiveness of the sacrificial rite and then to discover the meaning of salvation in the religious sense and the method for achieving it. Found in the scriptures, the Kaushitaki Upanishad and the Chandogya Upanishad, the essence which is found from the two main ideas of classical Samkhya. We come to a conclusion from the meaning of the essence found from the two main ideas of the classical Samkhya, the incomparable, Bura, almsgiving relation given to the Sangaya, namely the sacrificial rites of the Brahmins. Here the author will explain that the explanation of almsgiving, namely the sacrificial rite, is not found in Buddhism. As scientists conclude about sacrificial worship in Buddhist teachings below. In the Buddha Vinaya Pitaka of the Mahavagga I.245. Part of the Buddha's sages' name. The names of the Vedic sages were Athako, Vamako, Vamadevo, Vesamito, Yamatagi, Angiraso, Bharadvaho, Vasetho, Kasapo, and Bagu, by some Brahmins who were introduced to animal sacrifice. This section of the Vinaya Pitaka Anguttara Nikaya, Panchaka Nipata says that it is in the conversion of the Vedas that it is true that Buddhist philosophy rejects the Brahman philosophy that introducing animal sacrifices is recorded in the Buddhist view. 5. In the translation of the 11th verse Khalasan inscription it is written. 11. Anena punyena viharayena praditya jata, g arthavibhagavijña bhavantu. Sarv tribhavopapana janajananam anusasanajña. 11. Well, by giving viharayena, all the bhavantu of holy knowledge, the law of cause and effect, and birth in the three worlds, can be understood. Note. Viharayena, place of ascetic worship, Vihara. Monastery, place of meditation, Monastery. Vihasa, place of meditation, Wihanton. Monastery, place of worship. The meaning of a place of worship here is a place of worship that is practiced by non-Buddhist or Hindu practitioners. Before that we first understand the meaning of the Upanishad. The Upanishad according to the philosopher Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, the Upanishad is the beginning of the book which includes the pre-Vedic clarification or Rigveda, incorporated in the group clarification on the composition of the Upanishads in the Vedic period 1500 BC, is a philosophical composition, earliest in the world. Quote, in order to understand that the word Viharayena is a place of worship performed by non-Buddhist or Hindu practitioners, let us take a closer look at the word Bhavantu. Below. The word Bhavantu is the writing of the word in the Khalasan inscription. The literary study of the word is that the author confined the word Bhavana, which is included in the Upanishadic composition, the earliest philosophical composition in the world. The Bhavana Upanishad, Sanskrit. Bhavana Upa_Nasid, IAST, Bhavana Upanishad, is a small medieval-era Upanishad from Hinduism. Composed in Sanskrit, the text is classified as one of the Shakta Upanishads and is attached to the Atharvaveda. The Upanishads identify the human body as Srichakra Yantra and describe this theme, and its worship. This text manuscript was also found entitled as Bhavanopanishad. In the Telugu language anthology of the 108 Upanishads of the Muktika canon, narrated by Rama for Hanuman, it is listed at number 84. The Upanishads describe the human body to be Sri Yantra, Sri Chakra, by mapping each part of the body to chakra. This confirms that Shakti is the inner Atman, soul. The text is important for emphasis on antaryaga, internal worship, as opposed to external rituals and offerings. The text presents a non-dualistic idea, presenting the goddess as the highest reality of the universe. McDaniel states that philosophy in this text, as in many Shakta Upanishads, is the syncretism of the Samkhya and Advaita Vedanta in Hindu philosophy, which is called the Shaktadvaitavada, literally, the non-dualistic path of Shakti. So the word, Bhavantu, results from a search on the synonym for Bhavana, as well as the philosophical meaning of the Bhavana Upanishad, which explains the human body, confirms that Shakti is Atman, soul. It can be concluded that the word Bhavantu is not a theosophy or philosophy of Buddhist teachings. This is because in Buddhist philosophy that rejects the understanding of Atman, soul, it is emphasized as explained below. The concept of Atman, soul, is rejected by Buddhism. Terms such as anatman, not self, and shunyata, emptiness, are at the heart of all Buddhist traditions. The permanent transcendence of belief in a separate existence from self is an integral part of the enlightenment of Arhats. The Buddha did not accept the theory of the oneness soul or immanent identity in all things as not independent. In fact, according to the Buddha's statement in the 47th Kanda Samyutta, all thoughts about the self are certain, whether the thinker is aware of them or not. The thoughts of the five aggregates are the wrong one of them. The word, bhavantu, we get from the word, bhavana, is included in the Upanishadic composition, the earliest philosophical composition in the world. McDaniel states that philosophically in this text as in many Upanishadic Shaktas, is syncretism of the Samkhya. Larson, Bhattacharya and Potter scientists suggest it is possible that the early Samkhya doctrines found in the oldest Upanishads, 700 to 800 BC, provide a contextual basis for an influence Buddhism and doctrine Jaina. From the above explanation we can conclude that the word, bhavantu, which is written in the writing of the word on the Khalasan inscription is the previous philosophy that underlies Buddhism and Hinduism and even the doctrine of Jainism. From here we can emphasize that, the name, Sailendravamsa, was first encountered in inscriptions. Khalasan from 778 AD is someone who is not Buddhist or Hindu. Borobudur True BackHistory Book. Part 1 goes to Part 2. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, it is not defaming ethnic races and religions, but in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787.